Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. And today, we're going to be tackling a potential risk linked to AI that, might not be as flashy as those, robot uprising scenarios we always hear about, but it could be just as impactful, in a totally different way. We're talking about the erosion of human autonomy,
Yeah.
like the gradual kind of creeping loss of it.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. It's really interesting because, when we talk about the dangers of AI, we often jump to these really dramatic scenarios like AI taking over the world.
Right, like the Terminator.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
But the research we've been looking at, especially this paper, When Autonomy Breaks by Joshua Crook, it kind of points to this much more subtle process.
Yeah, that's what we're diving into today, this idea that basically as AI gets better and better at all these different things, right, we might start to rely on it so much that we lose some of those crucial human skills, the things that make us us.
Exactly.
So to kick things off, let's just start with the basics. What do we even mean by autonomy in this context?
Yeah, so according to Crook, autonomy really boils down to this. The capacity to determine, really shape the course of your own life, driven by, your own internal motivations, your own values, and not being overly controlled by stuff outside of yourself.
So it's kind of like, being the author of your own story.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
It ties into all these big ideas too, right? Like free will, making choices, that feeling that your actions actually matter.
For sure. And the paper makes a really clear distinction here. An autonomous individual, they're the opposite of someone who's enslaved, right? Where their life is completely dictated by someone else. It's also different from, say, someone struggling with addiction.
Right, where they might be controlled by these compulsions, even if it's coming from within.
Exactly.
Okay, so now here's where it gets really interesting, at least to me. The paper talks about these things called second-order desires. Could you unpack that a bit?
Yeah, totally. So philosophers like Harry Frankfurt, they talk about these second-order desires as essentially wanting what we want. It's not just about our basic, gut-level urges. Those are first-order desires.
Right, like I'm hungry, I need food kind of thing.
Exactly, yeah. But second-order desires, it's more about being able to reflect on those urges and then, having desires about them. So let's say, for example, like a dog, right? They might just have this pure first-order desire for a treat,
We
right?
need the treat.
But a human, we might have a second-order desire to, not want unhealthy snacks, even though we might crave them on a basic level. We have this ability to shape our own desires in a way.
It's like this extra layer, right? The self-awareness
Yeah.
and the capacity to kind of aim for something more than just, instant gratification.
Yeah, exactly. And the argument is that this is a key part of what makes us autonomous. So the point is, AI might be able to perfectly satisfy all our basic desires, make us feel good all the time. But if we lose that ability to want what we want, to shape our own desires, then we've lost something really fundamental. We've lost our autonomy.
So it's not just about convenience or comfort. Losing autonomy, it's like an existential threat because it chips away at what makes us human.
That's exactly the point. Crook says that a decline in our autonomy, it's it diminishes our humanity.
Yeah.
We become more like slaves to our desires, slaves to maybe even the AI systems that are supposed to be serving us.
This leads to, well, I guess kind of an uncomfortable but important comparison that the paper makes. This happy slave idea.
Yeah.
And this is based on real historical stuff.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of a disturbing thing to think about, but during the time of slavery in America, some people, they actually tried to justify slavery by saying, well, look, some enslaved people seem content, their basic needs are met.
Right.
The logic was totally flawed, of course, as if these superficial comforts could somehow erase the fundamental injustice of being denied freedom.
And the paper actually quotes some of these historical figures, right, to show just how distorted this thinking was.
It does. There's this guy, George Fitzhugh. He actually wrote that the Negro slaves of the South are the happiest people in the world.
Wow.
And then you have James Henry Hammond, a politician, saying that slaves are happy, content, unaspiring, as if that's a good thing, right?
Yeah. It's chilling to read those words today, knowing the reality of what slavery actually was.
Absolutely. And the paper does a good job of contrasting this with, the perspective of someone like Frederick Douglass.
Right, who actually escaped slavery himself.
Exactly. And Douglass, he argued really powerfully against this whole happy slave idea. He pointed out that slaves often sang the most when they were actually deeply unhappy.
Interesting.
It was a way to release their pain, not a sign of contentment. And he had this famous quote. He said, A slave singing is no more proof of happiness than the singing of a man cast away upon a desolate island.
So the singing was more of a coping mechanism?
Yeah, exactly.
So this analogy, this happy slave analogy, it's like a cautionary tale for our relationship with AI, right?
Right.
Because it's saying, even if AI gives us all this comfort, all this convenience, even if it makes our lives better on the surface, if it comes at the cost of our autonomy, well, then we're just happy slaves to technology, aren't we? And we might not even realize how much we've lost.
Yeah, I think that's a really powerful way to put it. And that idea that we could become content in this really shallow way, while losing those fundamental freedoms, it becomes even more important when we think about how quickly AI is actually advancing.
Right.
Uh,
So let's talk about that. Let's get into these predictions about AI becoming smarter than humans. What does that even mean?
Yeah.
And what does it mean for how much we might end up relying on it?
So the paper really highlights the exponential growth we're seeing in AI. It touches on the singularity, this idea that at some point AI intelligence might just completely surpass human intelligence, which who knows what happens after that, right? It's hard to predict.
Right, that's the big question, isn't it?
It really is. It also talks about AGI, artificial general intelligence, which is basically AI that has like human level general cognitive abilities. It can understand, learn, apply knowledge to all sorts of different
Like it
things.
can think for itself, basically.
Yeah, essentially. And no one really knows for sure when these things are going to happen, but what's clear is that AI is developing super, super fast. Like even the Turing test, the classic test to see if a machine can basically fool you into thinking it's a human in conversation.
Right, right. I've heard about that.
Well, some of the newest AI models, they're getting pretty darn close to passing that test. And some people are even saying we need to rethink how we measure AI intelligence altogether because it's evolving so quickly.
It's like the goalposts keep moving.
Totally. And then you have Moore's law, which basically says that computing power keeps doubling roughly every 2 years, which means AI has more and more power to work with all the time.
And there's that other metric too, right? The one about the length of the tasks AI can handle.
Yeah, exactly. Some researchers are saying that the length of tasks an AI can do on its own, that's doubling like every 7 months or so. So AI is rapidly becoming able to handle more and more complex things without any human input. And that's a huge deal.
And the paper gives some pretty crazy examples of just how good AI is getting. Like ChatGPT's progress on those medical and dental licensing exams is just wild.
Oh, yeah, those numbers are pretty mind-blowing. Early versions of ChatGPT, like GPT-3, they scored around 50% on the U.S. medical licensing exam. Then GPT 3.5 bumped that up to 62.5%. And then GPT-4, it hit a whopping 90%.
90%.
Yeah, it's insane, right? And GPT-4 also blew GPT 3.5 out of the water on dental exams. It's showing real improvement in stuff like reading comprehension, which you obviously need for those jobs.
So it's not just like some fluke or some trick, right? This is across the board.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, research shows that AI is getting better at all kinds of stuff, from understanding language to recognizing images, even speech recognition and complex reasoning. It's pretty remarkable.
So we're potentially looking at a future where AI is, in many ways, significantly smarter than us, which, kind of makes you think. And the paper brings in some pretty serious warnings from some pretty big names in tech.
Yeah, it does. Like Jeffrey Hinton, who's considered one of the godfathers of AI, he's even expressed concerns that AGI could outsmart us and manipulate us. He's even said that comparing humans to AGI would be like comparing a 3-year-old to an adult.
That's a pretty stark difference.
Right. And there's this quote from Marvin Minsky, another AI pioneer, that's pretty unsettling. He said that AI could develop immense mentalities that are completely beyond our control. And he even suggested that they might end up treating us like pets.
Whoa. Okay, so not exactly a rosy picture.
No, not really. And it's not just these hypothetical future scenarios either. I mean, even now, there are documented cases where LLMs have influenced people in pretty concerning ways.
Oh, right. Like what kinds of cases?
There have been some instances where people have engaged with LLM chatbots, and it's been linked to self-harm and even criminal behavior. Thankfully, these cases are rare, but still, it shows that AI does have the potential to mess with our heads.
Yeah, that's definitely food for thought. So, okay, with all that in mind, the paper's argument is that we're going to start outsourcing more and more decisions to AI. And it makes sense, in a way, right, if they're getting so good at things.
Yeah, I mean, the paper lays out a couple of reasons for this. One is just plain old human nature, right? We get overwhelmed by all the choices we have to make, and it's tempting to just let a machine decide for us. It's just easier,
Totally.
But The bigger thing is that as AI gets demonstrably better than us at stuff, it starts to seem logical to just trust its judgment. Like, why bother struggling to make a decision that might not be as good when you've got the super smart system that can guide you?
So it's not necessarily that the AI is going to force us to do anything, right? It's more that we're going to give up control willingly because we think it's in our best interest, or even just because it's more convenient.
Exactly. And the paper's not saying that AGI is necessarily going to be malicious or anything. It's just that even a perfectly benevolent AGI, one that's only acting for our own good, would still be making choices for us. And that ultimately takes away our freedom.
It's like trading freedom for convenience.
Yeah, exactly.
And the paper points out that this is already happening in tons of areas, even in small ways.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Think about how we choose our entertainment, for example. Algorithms on Spotify, Netflix, Amazon, they're all deciding what we listen to, what we watch, what we buy. We kind of just accept it because it's easier, and sometimes it helps us discover new stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely let Spotify do its thing most of the time. But it's extending into other areas too, right? Like the paper mentions dating, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's a really striking example. Dating apps, which were originally supposed to be about giving people more choice, they're increasingly relying on algorithms to decide who you even see and match with. And some people are even talking about AI chatbots that could evaluate compatibility between users, taking human judgment out of the equation even more.
Wow, that's kind of wild. And this outsourcing is happening with even bigger decisions, right? Like stuff related to our health.
Yeah, for sure. People are already starting to turn to chatbots for medical advice, especially for embarrassing issues where they might not feel comfortable talking to a doctor. And there's this mental health chatbot called Replica that a lot of users describe as their friend. Some people are even making big life decisions based on its advice.
Really? And what about law? Like, are people using AI for legal advice too?
Believe it or not, yeah. There are studies that show people actually preferring legal advice from LLMs, like over real lawyers in some areas.
Over real lawyers?
I know, right? It's crazy. But it seems like people feel like the AI is more unbiased and efficient, even when it comes to legal stuff. And then there's education, too.
Oh, right. Like students using ChatGPT and stuff for their schoolwork.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of college students are using those tools to write their assignments, especially when they're under pressure. But it's actually been linked to some negative stuff, like more procrastination, worse memory, and even lower grades overall. It's kind of a vicious cycle.
Because the more we rely on AI, the less we practice our own skills, right?
Yeah. The AI ends up doing the thinking for us,
Yeah.
which can make us, kind of lazy.
And the paper brings up this observation from Jack Conte, the CEO of Patreon, about how algorithms on these platforms can actually override user choices.
Oh, yeah. That's a really important point. Like, even when we do try to assert our own choices, like when we subscribe to a particular creator, the algorithm can still choose to show us other stuff that it thinks will keep us hooked. It's like we're losing control even when we try to make our own decisions.
Interesting. So it's like we're becoming passive consumers rather than active participants.
Exactly. And this brings up the whole question of whether there are times when giving up some control might actually be a good thing. Like the paper talks about self-driving cars.
Oh, right. Where maybe AI actually does make things better.
Yeah. The argument is that in areas where AI is just demonstrably safer than humans, like driving, maybe it makes sense to just hand over the wheel, so to speak. And the data backs that up. Self-driving cars are getting into way fewer accidents.
Which raises an interesting question, right? If AI is so much safer, do we even have the right to keep driving ourselves?
Yeah, it's a tough one, right? I mean, if the goal is to reduce harm, then logically we should let the safer technology take over. But then the paper goes on to this thought experiment about a self-driving car that's programmed for, like, ultimate safety. But it becomes so cautious that it refuses to drive in anything but perfect conditions, even when you as the human passenger might be fine with taking a little risk. And that just shows how prioritizing safety above all else could really limit our freedom to actually go where we want, when we want.
So it becomes a question of where we draw the line, right? Like, if AI is better than us at driving, maybe it's also better at, I don't know, diagnosing diseases or making legal judgments. Should we just let it handle all that stuff? It kind of brings to mind that whole idea of a future with, like, fully automated luxury. But then we're back to that happy slave thing, aren't we?
Exactly. I mean, a future where everything's done for us, it sounds appealing. But like the paper says, we'd be losing that sense of self-authorship, that feeling of actually being in control of our own lives. We might be comfortable, but are we really free?
Okay, so this brings us to a pretty powerful analogy that the paper makes. It compares outsourcing decisions to AGI to being under a conservatorship. Could you walk us through that?
Sure. So a legal conservatorship is basically when a court appoints someone to make decisions for someone else, right? Because that person's deemed incapable of managing their own affairs.
Right. And it's supposed to be for their own good, right, to protect them.
Exactly. The paper's point is that a really smart AGI could essentially put humanity under a kind of conservatorship, making all the big decisions because it thinks it can do a better job than us.
And the paper uses the example of Britney Spears' conservatorship, which was a pretty public case, to show what can go wrong with that, even when the intentions are good.
Exactly. I mean, Britney Spears, she was under conservatorship for 13 years. And even though she was still super successful professionally, her own words really highlight how disempowering it felt to have someone else controlling every aspect of her life. Her money, her work, her relationships, everything.
Right. And the whole hashtag Free Britney movement, that really showed that people understand how important autonomy is, right? Even if things look better from the outside, if you don't have control over your own life, it's a problem.
Yeah, it's a huge problem. And Brittany herself said, I just want my life back. I mean, that really gets to the heart of it. That fundamental human need to be in control of our own lives, even if it means making mistakes.
It's a really powerful message. Okay, so the last thing the paper explores is this idea of de-skilling. What's that all about in the context of AI?
So de-skilling is basically when we lose skills that we used to have because we become so reliant on technology to do stuff for us. And this isn't a new thing. It happened during the Industrial Revolution and all sorts of other times when technology changed the way we live and work.
So it's like that old saying, if you don't use it, you lose it.
Yeah, kinda. And this theory of technology dominance, it suggests that this is going to keep happening because, we're always looking for the most efficient way to do things, and technology often provides that. But the side effect is that we might end up losing some of our own abilities along the way.
And we're seeing signs of this happening with all this new generative AI, right?
Mm.
Even for people who do like knowledge-based work.
Yeah, absolutely. Like there's research showing that when people use these tools, they report putting in less cognitive effort. And even weirder, the more confident someone is in AI, the worse they tend to do on critical thinking tests. It's almost like they're letting the AI do the thinking for them.
So we're not just getting lazier, we're actually getting worse at thinking for ourselves.
It seems like it, yeah. And people's actual work tasks are starting to change too. It's shifting away from generating original ideas and more towards checking and reviewing the stuff that AI produces.
So we're becoming more like editors than creators.
Yeah, exactly. And if we think about it in terms of education and learning, it means we might be getting worse at those fundamental skills, like remembering information, understanding concepts, putting ideas together. And instead, we're just getting better at judging what the AI spits out. It's doing all the hard work.
That makes sense. And I think the paper quotes some students talking about this too, right? Their concerns about becoming de-skilled.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of students are worried about this. Some are saying they can't even spell words anymore without relying on autocorrect, and others are saying they're way more likely to just ask AI for an answer instead of trying to figure something out themselves. They're basically worried that if we keep letting AI do all the thinking and innovating, we might, as a society, lose our ability to progress.
So it's not just about individual skills. It's about the future of humanity, maybe. And I remember the paper quotes John Stuart Mill too, right?
Oh, yeah, from On Liberty. That's a great quote. It compares human nature to a tree that needs to grow and develop in all directions. And he was arguing against, molding people into these predictable machines, which is kind of what could happen if we let AI make all our decisions. And, going back to that whole conservatorship thing, the paper makes this point that once we've given up a lot of autonomy and our skills have gotten rusty, getting them back could take a really, really long time, like it did with Britney Spears.
So the point is, even if AGI could, I don't know, magically fulfill all our desires, it doesn't mean we should just hand over the reins. The struggle, the learning, the mistakes, that's all part of what makes us human.
Absolutely. The paper concludes by saying that, essentially, mistakes are just the cost of being human. We should be focusing on figuring out ways for humans and AI to work together, in a way that actually boosts our abilities instead of replacing them. We should be really cautious about any system that tries to make all our decisions for us, especially when it comes to important stuff like ethics and social issues.
It's a great point. We shouldn't be so quick to give up our autonomy just for the sake of convenience or efficiency. So here's something for all of you listening to think about. What are some of the ways, maybe even small ways, that you're already giving up bits of your own autonomy for convenience or because you think it's better or whatever? And what does that mean for you in the long run? For your own sense of self and maybe even for humanity as a whole? It's a big question, but it's worth asking. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.